This week, this session, we're looking at taking care of each other, taking care of each other in the present moment, looking at interbeing and our interconnectedness in the present moment. And so I'm going to be wise speech and deep listening. But before that, we'll do a meditation together. And this meditation comes from two teachers, which are Ram Dass, who's passed away now, and Mirabai Bush. We'll share the text with you also. So this meditation is a chance to other people are like us, particularly people that we might not feel very close to or similar to. This can be done bringing any kind of person to mind, but for the time being, for this practice, I'll invite you to bring someone that you don't know very well, but you might have seen them. Maybe they work in the post office or in the grocery store or at work, a colleague, but you don't really know them and you don't have a strong feeling of connection to them, nor a strong feeling of aversion, or, distancing from them. There's someone that's unfamiliar to you. So I'll let you ponder for a moment who you might like to bring into your meditation, who is your neutral person. So don't worry too much about picking, whoever pops into your mind. You can go with that and not think about it too much. But see if you get a real sense of this person as you remember them, what they look like, how they're dressed, something about how they talk or carry themselves, just whatever you picked up in the short interactions you may have had with them. I hope you have had I hope you've had enough time to choose someone. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about how this meditation will go, and then we'll jump in. Inviting you to use phrases that I will give you, but if there's other phrases that feel more appropriate for you or more authentic, more supportive, then you can, of course, use your own phrases. But mine will be suggestions. Okay, so let's begin. And I invite you to find a supportive posture for your practice. So finding a position that supports you in being alert, present, but also relaxed and at ease. You can have your eyes open or closed. If you keep them open, looking at a point, a few feet in front of you to rest your gaze. Beginning by feeling your body making contact with whatever you're sitting on or standing or lying on. Letting your body settle and open right where you are. Letting yourself come to rest. And really letting yourself receive the support of the earth, of all that is holding you in this moment. You can feel your breath, noticing the air as it comes into you and as it flows out of you. And now bringing the neutral person to mind. This person that you don't know well, who you have neither strong feelings toward nor against. Letting them come into your mind's eye and seeing them right in front of you. Letting yourself really tune into who they are. So being aware of them as if they're sitting right in front of you or quite close. Aware that they are a human being just like you. And then I invite you to repeat these phrases while looking at this neutral person in your mind's eye. This person has a body and a mind just like me. This person has feelings, emotions, and thoughts just like me. This person has experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering just like me. This person has at some time been sad, disappointed, angry, or hurt, just like me. This person has felt unworthy or inadequate, just like me. This person worries and is frightened sometimes, just like me. This person will have to face ill health at some point, just like me. This person will die, just like me. This person has longed for friendship, just like me. This person is learning about life, just like me. This person wants to be content with what life has given them, just like me. This person wishes to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be safe and healthy, just like me. This person wishes to be happy, just like me. This person wishes to be loved, just like me. Now allow wishes for well-being to arise. I wish this person to have the strength, resources, and social support they need to navigate the difficulties in life with ease. I wish this person to have all the support they need when they need it. I wish this person to be free from pain and suffering. I wish this person to be peaceful and happy. I wish this person to be loved because this person is a fellow human being, just like me. So by way of closing this practice, you may like to visualize yourself bowing to each other or offering some respect or kind gesture in whatever way feels right. Even a smile or a handshake. Just wishing this person well on their way. And we'll listen to the sound of the bell. So I'll just put on the air conditioning, and as I do that, I invite you to, if you like, to share a word or two in the chat about your experience with this meditation. So I'll just read a few of your comments. Feeling connected. Dolcezza, una vicinanza e commozione. So feeling soft and coming close to and feeling moved. Wonderful meditation. I've done similar ones, but not like this. Very intimate and engaged. My compassion. The person no longer seems a stranger or a mere acquaintance. Respectful, peaceful, felt easily connected to the other person. Ouvrir les yeux du cœur, opening the eyes of the heart. Space, respect, and inclusivity. A loving look. Feeling calm and patient. Tenderness, or calm and softness. Interbeing, interesse. I realize the oneness of all peoples. Not easy, but very authentic, very much interbeing. Connecting with people who need. Humbling to know we're all one and feeling it. Beautiful. So many more wonderful things you've written. The minute you say, just like me, I become more giving, more accepting. Yeah, thank you. Pensez pour ceux qui sont isolés, privés de contact. So thinking of those who are isolated and deprived of contact. It helped me realize that it would be good to talk with this person. Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you for your practice, and you'll get this as a text, so you can do it again. You can do it with other categories of people, not just people that you don't know. You could even do it with people that you find difficult. That's a little bit more challenging, but can also be very profound. It's also something that can be done in a group. So, okay. So I want to share now about the practice of wise speech and deep listening. So one of the aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, which the Buddha offered as ways to live in a fulfilling and meaningful way that doesn't cause suffering to ourselves or others. One of these aspects of these eight manifestations of this way of living is to practice wise speech. And there's also then an enumeration of ethical behavior, ethical ways of living that is articulated in the 5 mindfulness trainings. These come also from the Buddha as ways that those who are not monastics, who are lay, can focus their lives to bring about well-being and avoid suffering. And the fourth of these 5 mindfulness trainings is on loving speech and deep listening. And just a background on these trainings, they aren't rules or commandments or a law that we have to keep in some rigid way and make sure not to break. But they're called mindfulness trainings in the Plum Village tradition because they're things that we need to practice all the time. We need to work towards them in our daily lives constantly. And we are not aiming to be perfect, but to grow more and more in that direction. So one way of talking about the 5 mindfulness trainings is as a North Star that helps us to go in the direction of North. We never reach the North Star, but the North Star keeps us on track, so that mindfulness trainings aren't ones that we'll probably be able to do perfectly, but they keep us headed in the direction of greater compassion, greater wisdom, greater fulfillment, greater effectiveness in our lives. So I'd like to read the full text of this 4th mindfulness training on loving speech and deep listening. And I'll ask Stefano to post the text in all 3 languages so we can all listen. But if you'd also like to read as you listen, they're going to be shared with you. Okay, hopefully it's big enough for you to see. If not, we'll send these to you also. Loving speech and deep listening, the 4th mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups, and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truthfully, using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I am determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness. Thank you, Stefano. So there's a lot in this training. These aren't meant to be things we use to judge ourselves. They're meant to be things that inspire us to go more and more towards the goal or the aim that we have for ourselves. So I hope you receive it in that spirit of an encouragement and a direction. So I'll speak first about listening, and then I'll share a little bit about wise speech. So deep listening is something very precious that we can offer as a gift to others. it it can be something a bit rare. Sometimes we listen with an agenda, or we listen in order to respond, or to correct, or to resist what the other person is saying. We're not really listening to what they're saying. We're just waiting until they're done and planning what we're going to say. But really, deep listening is a very powerful gift that we give to others. It's opening ourselves fully to receive the other person just the way they are, without trying to fix them. It's kind of this softening and receiving, being like a mirror to them. So we just hold up a mirror. We don't add anything else in the mix. Just reflecting back faithfully what we're hearing them say. So we don't listen thinking about what we're going to say next. And we listen so deeply that we hear not only what they're saying, but also what's not being said. And I remember once I heard that someone in the London Sangha in the UK reported that when they would go to the Dharma sharing in the Sangha, they would find that the quality of listening was so deep that they would find themselves sharing things that they didn't even know were inside of them. Like the listening evoked things that even they weren't aware of in themselves. So we can provide a listening that has no judgment, no discrimination. And it can be so healing. It can even save someone's life to offer listening in this profound way. But we have to be present in order to offer this kind of listening. Often we're not completely there, and so we receive only partially what someone's saying, or nothing at all, because we're so busy in our own minds. And I know I'm guilty of sometimes with my parents, who are the people I speak to probably the most on the phone. We tend to have longer conversations, and sometimes I'll just space out and I'll, be doing something else as I'm talking to them, but not really giving my full attention. But when I do, when we both give each other our full attention, we have a very real meeting of hearts that isn't possible when I'm only partially there. So there's something very empowering about deep listening that allows the other person to find their own wisdom inside of them. And this is something that I'll read to you from the Quaker tradition, which has a practice of deep listening when they're trying to help someone discern what to do in their life. This person initiates a group. It's called the Clearness Committee, and they ask for support. And this is just a little piece describing how that listening works. It says, the conviction is there in this process of listening that each of us has an inner teacher, a voice of truth that offers guidance and power that we need to deal with our problems. But that inner voice is often garbled. It's often disrupted by various kinds of inward and outward interference. The function of the Clearness Committee is not to give advice or fix people from the outside, but rather to help people remove the interference inside of them so that they can discover their own wisdom from the inside out. So, through simple listening, we create the conditions that allow a person to find their own wholeness within themselves, right? I find that to be a really beautiful description. So we actually create space for the person to understand better what's going inside of them. And a story that I heard about this, sometimes it can be very challenging to be this presence for others, but there's a story of a man whose daughter, a teenager, had to be in a rehab center and for addiction, and it was time the father had been told that he could come pick up his daughter after some weeks, and unfortunately when he arrived, the counselor who was working with this teenager had to tell the father that in fact she wasn't ready to be released that day because some things had arisen just that morning that made them concerned for her health, for her safety. So this father, understandably, was very upset and became quite angry and started yelling at this counselor, blaming and judging and getting very angry. And the counselor was able to stay present and calm and really listen, not just to the anger, but to what was underneath the anger. And the person didn't respond or react in kind and hurl angry insults back at the father. The counselor just said, I really hear that this is hard for you. But he just reflected back what a mirror would do. No other interference. I'm really sorry, this is so difficult. And that compassionate response to his anger helped the father to actually get in touch with what was deeper than the anger, which was deep sadness and fear. And in that counselor's non-judgment of what was happening for him and compassion, the father was able to cry and to say, I'm so worried about my daughter. I'm so concerned for her well-being. And so the truth came out from beneath the anger, just the more raw, essential experience of being out of control, not being able to, fix or determine what was happening with his daughter and how bewildering that was for a father. So then the counselor could just be there and hold this father in that experience. And the father was able to come to a more peaceful acceptance of this was the reality right now, and his daughter needed more time and more care in this center. So it's a power of deep listening in a high intensity, volatile situation to help calm and bring someone back to out of the danger zone. And then I want to share also about a friend of mine who shared a practice of deep listening that was really helpful for him and his partner when they were estranged. He shared that they were living long distance, so they would only see each other every few months, every few weeks. So when they were together, they had a few weeks together, and they started this process where they first began to speak about neutral topics. They had 2 weeks together, and so one person would speak for 10 minutes, and the other would just listen. And it would be on something, not that wouldn't trigger either of them. And then after the 10 minutes, the other person who was just listening would reflect back a summary of what they heard for about 2 minutes. And then the first person could clarify or correct any misperceptions for the next 2 minutes. So let's say the whole process was about 15 minutes. So they had 10 minutes to share. Their partner reflected back what they heard for 2 minutes, and then they could correct or add or say, oh, you left this out, or actually it's more like this. So they could clarify for 2 minutes. And then the whole process would switch, and then the other person would have 10 minutes to share. And the first person would give back what they heard for 2 minutes. So they did this many times over the course of these 2 weeks on different topics. So they gradually began to choose topics that were more intimate and that were harder to speak about. And he said that they were able to understand patterns in their relationship and in each other that they hadn't seen before through this process. And so they were able to feel much closer to each other. And it really helped their relationship. So, being able to feel heard and to feel like your partner or anyone who you care about, who's in your life, that they really get you, that they really understand where you're coming from, and feeling like there's space, there's time for us to speak our truth, and that the other person will receive that, will be interested, will care about that. Makes a huge difference. So I'll share a little bit now also about the practice of loving speech, of skillful speech. There's many things to say about this. I won't be able to touch on all the aspects of wise speech, but one of them is that and this is in the mindfulness training, that we use words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. So, because we have an ingrained negativity bias, where evolutionarily, our brains have developed to pay much more attention to what's not going well than what is going well, which was a function of our needing to survive in prehistoric times, but now is not so useful to us all the time. So we tend to see what's negative, and that's expressed in our speech. If you think about it, often when we speak up in a situation is when something's going wrong. When something's not going the way we want it, then we have a criticism or a complaint. But when things are going well, we often don't notice it, and we don't say anything, we don't express appreciation, we don't celebrate what's good. We just take that for granted, and it's only when something is out of line that we give feedback. And this can also be our talk to ourselves, where we have a kind of critical self-talk when we make a mistake or when we don't do something we wish we had done, but we don't have an inner positive self-talk. So it's very important to water the good, to nourish and to appreciate the good. As we showed in the first 2 sessions, this diagram of the mind and the wholesome seeds, we can nourish the wholesome seeds in each other and in ourselves by expressing appreciation through our speech, by using loving speech. Because when we nourish the good in each other, when we tell someone, oh, I really appreciate, like our wonderful Margarita Matilda, your translation, that nourishes, and that helps that seed of confidence, that seed of hope, of being empowered. It helps that to grow, and then that behavior is strengthened. The thing that we like, that we appreciate in them, it gets stronger, gets more beautiful. So there's a story of a friend of mine in Germany who's a teacher, and she had a class of, I think they were fifth graders, so they were maybe 10 years old. And she knew there was going to be a boy coming into her class at the beginning of the next year, school year, that was known to be quite difficult in the school and had, difficulties and behavior problems. So she told her class before, I guess he was coming in from another class. So she told them, I'd like us to really take good care of him and to nourish any positive behaviors that we see in him and really welcome him. And so the class agreed, and they really took care to express their appreciation, to use words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. And they really took that as a special task to pay attention to what was good about him and to say it. And his behavior changed completely in the course of this few months that he had started being in her class. He really blossomed and began to feel more safe in himself. The behavior problems that had been, an issue before were no longer an issue in her class. And this same teacher, she shared with me another practice she did with her class was about halfway through the class, she gave everyone a list of every other student's name on a piece of paper with a line. And she asked everyone to write one sentence of appreciation about every other student in the class. So they all did this, and she compiled them, and she gave back each student, all the other students, praise or appreciation of them. And she said this also made a big difference in her class. She said the atmosphere of the whole class changed, and there was more trust, there was more harmony. Everyone felt seen, appreciated, and more connected to each other, so conflicts were less. There was more happiness, more togetherness in their classroom. So our speech is a really powerful way to bring about happiness and harmony and well-being. I'll tell a couple more stories and I'll pass it on to Richard. When my father turned 68, I decided to write him a thank you letter, a love letter with 68 thank yous. And at first I was a little bit intimidated by that many, but as soon as I started writing, I started to think of all these things that I'd never thought to be grateful for to my father. So I was grateful to him for doing my diapers as a child. I was grateful to him for trying to do my hair when I was little, and how he taught my brother and I to give donations, to give to charities when we started to have our own money. How he was always welcoming of my friends. How he would apologize when he had done something he regretted. How he told me no when I needed to hear a no when I was growing up. So I just started to write, and more things were coming up of things that he had done that I really appreciated. And pretty soon I had more than 90. So I joked with him. I said, you have to live at least to 90. And so, after I wrote that, I felt so much happier than when I started. And it wasn't because my life circumstances had changed. It was because I had nourished all these seeds of gratitude and joy in myself in reflecting on this. And then, of course, when I gave him the letter on his birthday, he also was very happy. And he told me later, he said, I take this letter with me everywhere I go. And when I don't feel good about myself, I take it out and read it, and it makes me feel better. So I've shared about this practice of love letters with many people, and I'm always getting notes or emails, or when I see these people years later, they tell me, oh, you know, that love letter you taught about, I did it for my mom, or for my daughter, or for my partner, or for my brother. And it was really, it made an impact on our relationship. So it's a very powerful practice. I know Richard has his own beautiful story of writing a love letter as well to his mom. So that is one way we can also practice loving speech, is just thinking about the people in our lives, and have we expressed the full range of our appreciation for them? Are we taking them for granted in any way? And if so, maybe we could write them a love letter. And one last story I'd like to share is, two stories. We have a practice in the Plum Village tradition called beginning anew, which is one of the steps in that practice is to express appreciation, to practice loving speech actively by sharing what we see that's good in the people that we're doing this practice with. So at the end of any family retreat, we would get the parents and children together. The children would have prepared a card for their parents ahead of time, saying what they appreciate, what they're grateful for in their parents. And the parents would come to the beginning anew prepared with some object from nature that represented what they appreciated in their children. And I remember when we did this in Germany, we had about maybe 25 kids and then all their parents. It was a big circle. We were outside. And it took an hour to go all the way around the circle to hear from all of the parents what they appreciated in their children. But you wouldn't believe this. For kids that were quite young, 6, 7, they sat still for the whole hour because there was something kind of sacred that just happened and fell over us in the circle as the children started to hear their parents expressing publicly what was so beautiful about them. And the children were just really listening and curious what each parent was going to say about their child. And sometimes the parents would cry. They had never expressed all this love for their child so openly, and it was very moving for them. So let me stop there because I want to make sure we have enough time for everything today. And Richard, shall I let you give the protocol at the end, or shall I still do that now?
Why don't I do that?
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So, dear friends, let me invite the sound of the bell for us to breathe and come back to this present moment if we've strayed somewhere else, and just notice wherever it is that we are. Thank you. I'd like to begin with a little story that goes back to the 1990s. An algebra class that I was teaching with 15 and 16-year-olds. And it was an unusual class in that it was having a lot of trouble paying attention. There were a lot of distractions. This was unusual in my school, which was had a very strong reputation and solid students. And I didn't know what to do about it. And so, see, I'm getting a message here. Hold on. I thought that it was a group of the younger boys who were causing the problems. But I didn't know that, and nor did I know what to do. So as luck would have it, I had a chance to speak with an educational consultant who was visiting our school, and I opened up to her and I told her what the problem was. And I asked her advice. And she looked at me and she said, "Richard, you think it's a group of the younger boys, but are you sure?" And I said, no, I'm not sure that that's what the problem is. So then she said, "Well, if you don't really know what the problem is, why don't you ask the students?" Well, I hadn't thought of that. But the very next day, I gave each of the students a small sheet of paper. And I said to them, "I think we all know that this class is having some difficulties. We're falling quite far behind the other classes. And I don't know what the problem is, so I really don't know what to do. So if you're aware of any possible explanations for why we're having difficulties, I would really appreciate it if you would write on this piece of paper what you see and what you know. And you don't need to sign it. And I'll take a look at them and see what I learn." The next day, I reported back to the class that, to my surprise, a very large majority of the students identified the same problem. This class met right after lunch, and it was a time when the students were tired out and had difficulty concentrating. So this was just about time for our year-end break vacation. And I said, I will try to do some research on what we could do to help with this problem while over vacation. Well, after Christmas, I spent a week in a small Sri Lankan forest refuge monastery, not far from where we lived. I mean, it was Sri Lankan in tradition, but not in location, as Kaira Jewel is. Anyway, one of the monastics at this center also taught yoga. So I approached him and I said, "I have a problem at school with students with low energy. Do you know anything that they could do that would help them generate some energy?" And Bhante, the teacher, said, "Yes, I can show you something. I can show you a very simple stretching exercise." And so I'm going to offer you all this exercise now, and I will do it too. I don't know what to do here because I can't see myself on the screen, so I don't know what you're seeing. So if there's something I can do here, maybe Stefano, you can let me know. Or okay. Well, okay. Well, I'm just going to. Okay, so for those of you who would like to join me, and I encourage you all to do that, to at least try this, we need to stand, and we need to make some space in front of us. So we're standing, relaxed, but upright, and feeling our whole body. And then we're going to rise on, I'm going to describe this and then we'll do it. We're going to rise up onto our tiptoes, and we're going to let our hands rise up over our head. And we'll breathe in as we do that. And then as we breathe out, we will lower our hands down as far as they will go. And then we will breathe in again, raising our hands, and breathe out, lowering them. But we will try to stay on our tiptoes the whole time, which is very hard, and we probably will not be successful. It's not a problem. We just come back to our tiptoes when we find ourselves not being able to maintain that. So we do this 10 times. So breathing in and out just to prepare. Okay, up on our tiptoes. Breathing in, up. Breathing out, down. Up. 2, down. Up, 3, and down. Up, 4, and down. Up, 5, and down. Up, 6, and down. And 7, and down. And 8, and down, and 9, and down, and 10, and down. So the class was standing in a big circle, all doing this practice. And after we finished, I asked them, how do you feel? And virtually every one of the boys and girls said, I feel energized. I feel more alive, awake. So I said, great. We will begin class every day with this practice. Except I will not lead it. You will take turns doing the leading, doing the counting. And if you come to class and you are completely wide awake and don't feel that you really need this, you don't need to participate. But everyone who is feeling a little tired, please join. So every day, we began our algebra class in the front of the room doing this practice. People would walk by the classroom and look in the window and see these math students on their toes. And the class got kind of a reputation for doing this, and it was a kind of an identity for them. And of course, the best part was, that was very important because they really came together around this practice. But also, they started paying more attention. They paid more attention to their teacher, and they paid more attention to each other. And the whole atmosphere of the class changed with this very simple exercise. It did not take away from the learning. In fact, it made possible much more learning. So that's an example of a practice that turned a group of students into what the Buddha would call a sangha, a community that lives in harmony and awareness. Much more harmony, much greater awareness than before we started doing this practice. I learned a lot about Sangha when I became involved with mindfulness practice in Thich Nhat Hanh. But even before that, I had started using small groups in my math classes and having the students help each other. This algebra class was not a small group class, but most of them were. And they would work in these small groups and stay together for an entire unit. And they would be together every day, except the days that they had examinations. To promote harmony, I would ask the students after a week or couple of weeks in their group, how are things going? So they would write little slips of paper and tell me how their group was functioning. And usually the groups functioned very well. But occasionally students would identify the fact that their group was having problems. And of course, the problem was always someone else. So I would come, I would be constantly walking around and checking in with groups. But when there was a problem, I would specifically come to the group and say, I understand from the feedback you've given me that your group has been having problems. And I want each one of you to think very hard about what you can do differently, begin doing or stop doing, that would help the group. So I wanted to encourage the students not to look for solutions outside themselves, but to take responsibility for their own part of their own contribution to their sangha, to their little group. And then, at the end of the unit, the students all wrote thank you letters, thank you notes to each other student in the group, saying what they were grateful for, kind of like the German teacher did for the whole class, for her class of students. These students would write the thank you notes to each other in their group. And if I forgot to ask them to do that, they would say, oh, Mr. Brady, we haven't written our thank you letters. We're not ready to join in to have new groups yet. Just another interesting sidelight, if any of you are thinking about using groups, or maybe you already are. Originally, I had one goal, which was that everybody would work with every other student at some time during the year. And then a secondary goal that I had was that I would try to have at least one of the better students, math students, in each group. I was trying to avoid groups where several of the people struggled and there wasn't someone to really help. Well, the students were not very happy with that because they thought I was engineering the groups and that so far they hadn't been with their best friend and that I was keeping them apart. There were all kinds of stories that they made up in their minds about what was going on behind the scenes. It was not transparent, totally. It wasn't transparent. So I took what I thought was a chance, and I told the students that the next groups would be formed by drawing their names out of a hat. And I asked if somebody would like to draw the names out of the hat. Somebody volunteered, and there was a little tension in the room, but the new groups were picked totally at random, and everybody accepted that. And after that, that is the only way I ever had groups form. And there was something magic about that. The fact that the students themselves were generating the groups, that it wasn't based on favoritism, that made these groups start off on the right foot. There were problems. There were problems because there were students who were in the habit of not doing their homework. Some of them were very bright students who didn't feel that they needed to do their homework. So they would come to their groups and they weren't prepared to enter into the discussion. So I was always looking for ways in which to help the students take more responsibility for their role in their group. And I received a very wonderful teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh in 1992, the first time that I went to Plum Village for a retreat. It was a 3-week retreat in June. And walking meditation is very important in his practice. And I can remember sitting there in the meditation hall before our very first outdoor walking meditation. And Thai, our nickname, meaning teacher, said to us, "We're about to go outside for walking meditation. Now, some of you may not feel that you are very able to walk well. You've never done it before, you're nervous. You know there are other people in the group that are beautiful walkers, and as you see them, you'll start judging yourself. And that is a real misunderstanding about what this practice of walking meditation is, because it is walking as a community, as a sangha, and each person in the group will lift up every other person in the group. We're all in this group to support the practice of each other. We're not in this just for ourselves. So he said, I want to remind you of that. So I'm going to give each one of you a sticker. So before we went out, each one of us received a sticker that said, I walk for you. And Thai asked us to put it in one of our shoes so that when we put our shoes on, we would be reminded every day that we were not just walking for ourselves, but that we were walking for everyone. What a great idea. I went home and I went to a printer and I asked the printer to print 1,000 stickers that said, I learned for you. And the first day of class, I gave every student a sticker and I said, please put this on the cover of your math book to remind yourself that when you look at that book and when you work, read the assignment and do the problems, you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for everyone, especially those others in your group, but really the whole class. So I was always looking for ways to promote the feeling of togetherness and sangha. I want to tell a story about a different kind of sangha experience. I had 2 students who were friends. Both of them were athletes, and both of them were smart. But they would kick each other as one of them would walk by. The other would try to trip him or kick him, and it was a very big problem. And I was not used to dealing with discipline problems at my school. There were very few. So I reached out at that a group of us who were students of Thai started an organization called the Mindfulness in Education Network. And you'll receive information about this either following this meeting, or this session, or the next. But it was a very large group worldwide of educators who are interested in mindfulness. So I posted on the listserv a description of my problem, and I said, I need a mindful solution to this. Well, I got 3 or 4 really wonderful responses, and one of them met the situation perfectly. And so I met with each of the students separately, and I asked them whether they knew about the martial art Aikido. And I explained that in Aikido, when the other person comes to attack you, rather than oppose his energy, you move and let it flow past you. That if you try to stop the energy, you are giving away your power. But if you let it move past you, you are retaining it and disarming your opponent. So they both were very interested in this. And they agreed separately that if their friend agreed, they also would agree to not respond to an attack, but to let it pass by. And then they met together and agreed together. And finally, we put it into practice. And not surprisingly, there were no problems after that, because there was no point in trying to provoke your friend, because your friend was not going to be provoked. So the Sangha here was not only just working things out in the classroom, but it was also this worldwide Sangha of educators interested in mindfulness that I belonged to and that I could reach out for support. So that was a real gift. I think at this point, maybe it would be a good idea to invite a bell, to invite all of us to breathe and just let everything be absorbed. I want to talk a little bit more about deep listening, because that is a very important part of Sangha and taking care of each other. And 2 short stories. The first one is a short story that Kaira Jewel told me some years ago about herself. We all in retreats do consultations where retreatants come and share something with us that they would like us to listen to deeply and then respond to. And what she shared is that when that would happen, because she was listening so deeply to the other person, she was not thinking at all about what they were saying. She was just letting it enter her. And so at the end of listening, when the person who was speaking stopped and said, "So what can you tell me?" she would say, "I need a minute or two to gather my thoughts because I have no response right now." And in fact, my own most profound experience with deep listening came on a retreat in Italy. It was 2015. And we did several deep listening exercises. And the second one, I was not involved in listening, because we had an odd number of people I was watching, and people were so still as they were listening. And I mean, they were not expressing anything on their face. They were just totally glued to their partners. And I was so excited to hear what kind of experiences they were having afterwards, and wanted to, would share with the group. Well, nobody raised a hand, and I was very disappointed. And then Laura Donna, who some may be listening now, from Sicily, raised her hand and shared the fact that when she was listening to her partner, a moment in time came when she disappeared, when there was only the listening. There was no longer her, Laura Donna. And it was such a beautiful example of interbeing that I tell that story very often. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it with me. And I'm going to also now move to another story from Italy. And this is the deepest Sangha experience that I think I've ever had anywhere. This happened in 2015. It was the third retreat that I led for educators at Centro Avalokita. And I asked the staff if we could have noble silence, which is a time of not talking, not having conversations, but only speaking if we really had to, and trying to write things down even then. And I asked if we could have noble silence every day. This was an 8-day retreat from the end of the evening program until the end of lunch the following day. Well, this did not work very well. There were conversations during outdoor walking meditation. There were conversations at night outside. And I had the feeling that, and then there were complaints in the sharing groups, in one of the two in particular, that there was too much silence, and they had not come, these participants hadn't come to this retreat for so much silence. Well, in talking about this situation with the facilitators, they suggested that I shouldn't worry about it because Italians love to talk. And of course, anywhere, the teachers talk the most because teachers are paid to talk. And the worst time to get teachers to be silent is in the summer because they don't have classes to talk to, and they're looking for special opportunities to talk, any opportunity. Well, I decided that I wasn't satisfied with leaving the situation as it is. So the next day, went to the group, and I gave each person a piece of paper. And you'll recognize this. I said, I think we all know that this noble silence is not being honored, but I don't know why. So if you yourself have conversations and don't honor the noble silence, would you write yes, or in any language, Italian, C, I think it's C, on the front, and then on the back write all the reasons you that you're aware of for why you talk during the noble silent time. And if you observe noble silence, of course, just write no and turn it in with the blank on the back. Well, a large majority wrote yes. And of those who wrote yes, by far the largest reason was, this is a very special opportunity for me. These teachers are not like the ones back home whom I teach with. And there's not enough time to get to know them. I need to talk more. This was a situation that I had no feeling for how to respond to. What would satisfy everybody? So I asked Stefano to have a 2-hour talk, if I could have a 2-hour talk the next day with the Sangha, with the group. It was almost the end of the retreat by this point. But I began this 2 hours by telling them that exactly what I just told you, what they had told me about the problem. And I said, I don't know what to do. And I know that when there's something that in our tradition, one doesn't know what to do, there's a few different responses. One is to just let go and do nothing, let things continue. Another one is to turn over the problem to the Buddha to take care of. I had never actually tried that, but this time I said, I'm going to do that. And our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, has told us that the next Buddha will be the Sangha. And so you are the Sangha. I'm turning this problem over to you to come up with a solution. And so for the next hour, more than an hour, one by one, going around the circle, each person spoke from the heart about why he or she wanted to have a lot of noble silence or did not. And very soon, the suggestion was made that there could be a place outside of the main building where people who wanted to have conversations could go. And that was a very popular solution until someone pointed out that it would divide the Sangha into 2 groups, those who went outside and those who stayed in and observed the noble silence. And in fact, one of the teachers said, that's what happened when we started to phase out of smoking for the teachers in our schools. And we had 2 faculty lounges, one for smokers and one for non-smokers. And it completely divided us into 2 groups. It was not healthy. So we needed a different solution. And so finally someone proposed, what if we just end noble silence at the end of breakfast instead of the end of lunch? Everyone said they were willing to try that. And so the next day, which was the last day of the retreat, we did that. And people remained silent until after breakfast. And to end the story, the next year, we had that same meeting the very first afternoon of the retreat for the participants to decide on how much noble silence they would like to have. And of course, they had the same differences of ideas, but in the end, they decided to have noble silence and after lunch. And every year since then, the group has done that. and they have ended after lunch. And it has been the most profound coming together of a group of people, taking care of each other, listening to each other's needs, and changing their own ideas about what they needed to come together with the others. I think we're running a little bit over. I'm going to delete a practice, but I want to just tell you about a Tibetan practice which you can find on the internet, called Tonglen, Tonglen. It is a practice of taking in negative energy or suffering from someone and taking it in through the gut and bringing it up into the heart. Let's just try this for a minute. Pick somebody that you know who is suffering. And closing your eyes, invite their suffering in through your stomach, this energy of suffering, this dark energy, and bring it up into your heart where it can be purified. And then up and up and up to your third eye, the middle of your forehead, and then send out this light, this energy that has become light and healing back to this person. So this is one of the strongest practices from Tibetan tradition for caring for the other person, and often for people whom we can only care for that way because they're very far away or because they would not want to be cared for in any other way. We can direct that practice at people who are physically ill, suffering in that way, or having emotional challenges. And we could make a practice of doing that kind of healing practice with our most difficult student every day. And we don't need to even know the cause of that difficulty. We can feel that energy of suffering and just take it in, purify it, and send it out. Now, the full practice is, after having done that several times, then to expand it and take in the energy from all difficult students, or from all people with cancer, or from all people who are suffering depression on the planet, and purify it and send it out to all. So it is amazing what we are capable of when we learn practices like this. So I would encourage you to read up on Tonglen, Tonglen, and maybe you can find a video of somebody on YouTube who is doing this practice. Okay, last, and for me the most important. What we've been talking about, taking care of the other, is really not the deep practice. Because in the deep practice, there is no other. We all we are all manifestations of the same entity, of the same energy, whatever it is. And this is embodied in a poem that many of us know, and perhaps many of us know the story of this poem. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Please call me by my true names," in 1978. At that time, he was helping Vietnamese boat people, find a new home, who were escaping from Vietnam on small boats, very perilous. And one evening he received word that one of these boats had been boarded by Thai sea pirates, and a 12-year-old girl had been raped and then had jumped overboard into the ocean and drowned. And Thai tells the story of not being able to sleep, of just walking back and forth, wanting to find a way to turn the suffering that he was feeling into healing. And I think it was practically morning when this poem came to him. And it came to him when he realized that if he had been born in one of these poor coastal villages of Thailand, and he might, growing up in those same circumstances, have decided to get out by becoming a pirate. And he might have done exactly the same thing that this young pirate did. That it was the causes and conditions that led to this person's actions. And they were very different from his, but in a way, there was really no difference. As the exercise you did at the beginning, just like me, this sea pirate was just like Thai. He wanted the same things for himself. And for others too, probably. Please call me by my true names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second, I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch. To be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest. To be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower. To be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am that bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear pond of water, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo, with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open. The door of compassion. So before signing off, I need to say something about the home practice for you to do with your partner sometime during the next 2 weeks. It is a practice of deep listening and loving speech that you will do for each other. Jerome actually wrote it in the chat. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that today? All go into breakout groups. We considered it, but it turned out it's way too difficult. And besides, it's not necessary because you have your own partner who speaks your same language. And this time, you will not just be teaching them something, you'll be doing the practice along with them. So you will find in the follow-up message, oh no, I think you've already received this, the protocol for loving speech and deep listening. And you will also find the reading. And so what we'd ask you to do is to read that protocol now and familiarize yourself with what it is that you and your partner will be doing when you meet. And then you could send that protocol to your partner also, or probably that would be good so that you both have done that reading. And you'll know that you're going to be looking at a poem, which was also sent to you a couple of days ago. And your partner will be reading the same poem. It's very short. And then you'll be spending time writing on paper or on a journal your reflections on that poem. What comes up in each one of you. And you'll spend maybe about 10 minutes, it tells, just sitting with it and writing. And then by agreement, one of you will begin to share from the heart anything that has arisen and wants to be shared. It doesn't need to be something that has been written down. It could be totally spontaneous, but just talks. And the other listens deeply. And the person sharing may stop speaking at some point before the time is up. And that is totally fine. The time is for that speaker to speak. Your job is just to continue to listen. Listen to the silence. And the speaker may have something more to say, or it may be that you end the period of that person speaking with the period of silence. It's totally fine. And then you'll be acknowledging what has just happened, and then you'll switch roles. So you can go ahead and send the protocol to your partner and the poem, and you can read the protocol yourself. I suggest that neither of you read the poem beforehand so that you're both starting fresh reading it. As I said, it's very short. You both read it together silently and then do your journal writing before you do your sharing. So thank you very much for your long attention, and it's been a real pleasure to share with you, and I know Kaira Jewel would say the same. And we look forward to answering your questions in 2 weeks. So if you've been saving questions, now is the time when you can send them anytime during this next week. We ask you to do it during this first week so that we have time to really look at them and see what it is that feels like will be most beneficial for everyone to hear answers to. Maybe you have some new questions that arose as you were listening to us today. So thanks again, and have a wonderful 2 weeks. Have a wonderful life.